Hello class, this video is to catch you up in case you took a snow day on Wednesday, February 5th. We are getting into Chapter 4, Extensions of Demand and Supply Analysis. So, I want to let you know that we are going to cover some aspects of the appendix before we get into the regular part of the chapter. Alright? So the first thing I want to talk about is consumer surplus. Now, remember that the demand curve shows us someone's willingness to pay for an item. So let's talk about this item here, Q1. If we go up to the demand curve, then we hit this point right here, and we find that that consumer is willing to pay this price P1. The cool thing is, this PA is the price that they actually have to pay. So if they're only paying PA, then this whole difference right here is their consumer surplus. Now let's put numbers on this. Okay, let's say that they value the item at $20, but they only have to pay $11. That means that their surplus, their consumer surplus, is $9. Now, I want to make a note that we talked about surplus at the end of Chapter 3 as being when quantity supplied is higher than quantity demanded. This is consumer surplus. That's different. If we add the word consumer before surplus or producer before surplus, it's going to mean something different. So I'm sorry about that. It's just something that economists have done for a long time, so we're going to have to deal with it. Now let's do this again. Let's come over here. Look at this quantity 2 right here. At this quantity, someone is willing to pay P2. We can see that because this is the height of the demand curve right there. Okay, so let's just say that P2 is 16. If that's the case, then this person gets a $5 surplus, which is the difference in height right here. Now, there are plenty of other units. Here's a unit, here's a unit, here's a unit, and each of them have their own consumer surplus, which is the height difference between the price that they actually have to pay and however much they were willing to pay, which we can read off of the demand curve. And so basically, if we add up all of these consumer surpluses for every consumer, what we end up getting is the area of this blue triangle. So it's this tall from this point here down to this point, and it's this long from 0 over to QA. Alright, so we can find out how big that is by using the formula for area of a triangle. So this was 20. Let's say that this intersection point right here is 21, just to make our math easy. Then we get 1/2 times the base, which if you want, this could be the base of the triangle, or it could be this. So I'm just going to say that that's 21 minus 11 gives us the base of that triangle. And then our height is going to be the difference between 0 and QA. So we take QA minus 0. So now let's just say that QA equals 20. Okay, if that's the case, then we get 1/2 times the difference here is 10 times QA minus 0 is 20 minus 0. So that's going to equal 100 for our total consumer surplus. Now, producer surplus is the same idea, but from the opposite perspective. Some producers, say for this quantity right here, there's a producer willing to bring it to market for this price P3. However, they can charge PB. The market price is PB. They get to sell their output for that much. So this is the difference between how much they actually receive and how much they would have been willing to receive. That is their producer surplus. And the same is true for this item Q4. This height is their producer surplus, and just like with consumer surplus, the area of this red triangle here is the total producer surplus. So if we put a price down here, say that this is 3, say that PB is 7, and let's just say that QB equals 5, right? Then our producer surplus would equal 1/2 times 7 minus 3 times 5 minus 0. Alright, so that would be 1/2 of 4 times 5, which is going to equal 10. Next, the gains from trade are the sum of consumer surplus and producer surplus. So let's just take a look at this unit right here call this QX. At QX, we go up here to the supply curve and we find out that over here we have a producer who would be willing to produce for this price. Let's call it P1. And at that same quantity, there is a consumer. Here's the height of his demand curve, and the value here is P2. So the consumer surplus for this item is the difference between this market price and the price that the buyer has to pay. I'm sorry, the market price and his willingness to pay. And then the difference between the market price and the seller's willingness to sell is the producer surplus for that item. If we add up the consumer surplus and the producer surplus for everything that's traded, we end up with the gains from trade.